How did you get started in comedy?
My I had a sort of baptism of fire in terms of doing stand up, in that I was dared to do it by a mate who was drunk. I was in Lavery's bar, and obviously Lavery's owns various bars in Belfast. One of them being the Pavilion on the Ormer Road, and we were drunk, and obviously on the screens they advertise various things in various different bars associated with Lavery's. One of which was an open mic night for comedy that was run by Graham Watson, and drunkenly I was dared to do it. So I think it was within 5 or 6 weeks of that was stood on stage trying to make people laugh, and I've been doing it ever since. Like it's so unusual. Like it's always something I was always funny to my mates, but I wasn't enough of a psycho to go, I could do this for a living, sure kid. You know what I mean? It was never like that. So it came as a result of a dare, a very, very chance sort of event, you know.
How'd that first time go? Do you remember what you talked about?
I talked about um, the time that a spide or a schmick or whatever you want to call them these days, the sort of Belfast pound stretcher blazing squad looking dudes. I had a story which is true about the time that one of them came up to me when he was drunk and told me I looked like a Polish Gok Wan. So that was one of my first, um, which unfortunately true and also unfortunately still applicable. And I talked about being drunk in the Asda in Strabane, where I'm from, and I also talked about the time. Oh my god, I talked about unfortunately this is true as well. I was working in a Centra for years, and you know when you've kind of got like a routine in your head, you scan the stuff, ask for the money, they give you money, you give you change, and blah blah blah. Within this sort of routine was you had to lick your thumb to separate plastic bags. You've got a big bunch of them, and to this day, that's still the most irritating thing in the world, is separating plastic bags without doing that. And for some reason, there was some day I was flustered and messed up the order in which I was doing stuff, and genuinely took some guy's stuff, scanned it, said how much it was. He gave me money, and just before I gave him his change, I licked the money in my hand and gave it to him. Yeah, that's unfortunately true as well. So I just kind of talked about me generally making a hash of basic, fundamental things in life.
Mm.
You know?
Yeah, I mean that can happen sometimes if you're doing something you're so like you're not even thinking about what you're doing anymore, and
Yeah.
yeah, that can happen if
Oh,
you're like in a routine of shit.
yeah. But and it was okay. Like the set, you know, it went fine. It went well enough to do it again. But I just did like I still have the footage of it and watched it recently, and it made me cringe. Like I couldn't take the mic out of the stand properly, and then when I did, I nearly busted my eye because the mic just went like that. And I was like, felt like I just had a real dry throat, and even with a microphone, still didn't feel like I was talking loud enough. Really that sort of level of anxiety that you get. But yeah, such a weird thing to still be doing it, given how I started.
Mm. Did you ever reuse any of the material?
I used the Polish Gok Wan thing for a fair while, um, before Gok Wan wasn't popular anymore, so I dropped it. I had to change to Alan Carr for a few years, and then it was Sue Perkins, who used to host the Great British Bake Off. I did that for a while, and I don't know who it's going to be now. To be honest, could be, I don't know.
I mean, if you said Gok Wan to someone who's like 18 now, they probably wouldn't have any fucking clue who you meant.
They wouldn't have a clue who he was at all. I mean, like, he was so famous for quite a long time, and then I don't even know if he still does anything on TV. Probably
What was
does the
this?
odd wee bit, but
What was the show called? Was it How to Look Good Naked?
oh yes, I did
Mm.
look good naked, and yeah,
I mean, it's kind of hypocritical. He's like criticizing people while he's still got clothes on.
exactly. Yeah, like you have to commit, you have to set an example. So get the scrotum and plum out, and let me see what you're working with, Gogwan. You
Uh,
know,
so before you did that, like before the dare, had you ever tried like, or had you ever thought about comedy before? Like, had you ever like seriously considered it, or was that like just like spur of the moment, sort of go for it sort of thing?
it was, well, I say spur of the moment. I was dared, but obviously there was an element of having to wait. Like when I applied for a spot, it was early-ish, maybe early-ish to mid-September, and then it was October 18th that I did my first set. But in terms of thinking about it prior to messaging the open mic Facebook page for a spot, no, because it just didn't seem feasible. It always seemed like something other people did, you know what I mean? And I grew up in Strabane where there's not much of a showbiz, lifestyle, and there's no showbiz aesthetic in Strabane. We still use a sundial down there, for fuck's sake. And, so it just never seemed feasible. But obviously, because I moved to Belfast, because I was studying media, hence why I worked in the centre for so long. And so it just all fell into place that way. But growing up in Strabane, no, I was lucky to be, the third best window licker in my family. You know what I mean? That was my goal. You know what I mean?
So you're telling me that Strabane isn't like an absolute center of comedy and media?
Oh no, it's not. It wouldn't be a hub of entertainment. You know what I mean? Despite Hugo Duncan and myself obviously being there, but no, I mean, like, it just didn't seem like the thing to do. And even in terms of, when I was younger and pre-university, I still think in terms of Northern Ireland, there wasn't even a lot I could have done near Strabane, even if I had been willing to travel. Don't know if there was much happening in Derry and Omagh. I think it was Belfast via the Empire was probably your main thing. And then obviously the difference between that and the difference in the scene now is night and day, obviously. So there's more going on now. But when I started, there still wasn't even a wild lot. So I was lucky to be based in Belfast, and lucky that I was able to live abroad and, and get my visa to go to Belfast and my injections and all that stuff.
Thanks so much for listening. If you haven't already and you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe to this podcast and to our mailing list. And don't forget, my book, Brexit, The Establishment Civil War, is now available for pre-order on Amazon. You'll find the link in the description below. Until next time, thanks so much for listening.